Hello out there, folks. How are we all doing? And I'm just going to check and see if we are, in fact, live. Let's have a quick look now. And come to my page here. And yes, we are. Brilliant. Okay. Is the sound coming through? Yes, it is. Excellent. Right. Cool. I can get on with things. If you're watching out there, please, excuse me, I've got a terrible cough at the moment. Come and say hello in the chat. Let me know you can hear me and all of that. So, in my last live stream, which was only a couple of days ago, for this latest beta build of Ultima Blister 2 by Reza Studios, I looked at, this is version 1.5.3, sorry, version 1.5.1.3, build 2407 AVX. So I was looking at the tyre physics of a few cars. I tried some stock cars. I tried McLaren, a couple of other cars. And everything I tried felt really, really good. But after I've been doing over the last couple of days, and with the help of my good friend Flip Flops as well, in fact, I better just text him and let him know I'm doing a stream, because I always let him know. I found out a few things, and they're quite interesting. And one of them I really didn't expect to find. But I have found issues, not terrible issues. As Renato, our head dev over at Reza, has said, with this latest round of tyre physics, it is still very much a construction site, and it's to be treated as very much work in progress. So do bear in mind that this is all footage from the beta. So there will be a lot of things cleaned up. So before I get into what I've found, I'm just going to load up a track here. So I've been doing all of my testing, and I'm going to go back there today as well, at Laguna Seca here, because I've just got used to that as a test track. And the testing I was doing on the last stream as well, just to keep everything sort of in a controlled test, if you like, I was using the date of that day, and I've set everything back to that date, and I was using these settings, heavy rubber and sunshine, so it's quite a hot track. So I'm going to go there for a start with the McLaren 720S GT3. So let's get out there. Now, the GT3, bear in mind that we have been told that there have only been tyre adjustments made to the soft compounds, or softer compounds, on any car in the green list. And one thing I never thought about at first was the soft compounds. Well, the GT4s run on hards or wets. They don't run on softs at all, but they're in the green list. So does that mean that their tyre physics hasn't changed, or do they just mean any compound above wet, if they're softs? If they're a car like one of the F1 cars that has got soft, mediums, hards and wets, does that mean just the softs? And in GT4s, does it mean just the hards? And obviously in GT3, does it mean just the softs? But could that mean only soft compounds, literally? So have the GT4s been updated? We don't know. That's unclear at the moment. So as I said, do come and say hello in the chat, just so I know that that you can hear me all right and the sound's all right. Let me know if there's any problems with the sound. I'm just gonna adjust a window here. So, bearing in mind that this car runs on soft slicks. Now, I'm going to go out. I'm going to go out on a default setup. So, let's reset this to defaults. And bear in mind the brake bias here. Because brake bias is another thing that I want to talk about. Hello, Ben. How you doing, mate? Thanks for letting me know you can hear me. Right, so, yeah, keep in mind that we are on a brake bias that is set 57 to the front. So a forward brake bias, and also that we're running on soft slicks. And let's get in the car here. Now, keep an eye on the tyre temperatures. down here in the bottom right, which this car obviously starts off with tyre warmers, so we're already at 72, going down to 71 at the moment. So before they get too cold, I'm going to start driving, and I'm going to, I'm on the default setup, but I've done all of my tests with ABS and traction control on 1. So that's what we'll carry on doing this example with, if you like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out and do about 3 laps, including an out lap, so that's 4 laps in total here at Laguna Seca, and I'm going to try and push it reasonably well, which I find hard to do when I'm sort of presenting and talking, but I'm going to try and push it all the same to make them decent laps and, you know, at racing speed. I'd usually be at qualifying speed, but I'm, you know, concentrating on presenting and talking at the same time, so I'm probably going to be down at race speed, and my driving isn't going to be as good as usual. See, there I was just a little bit outside of the apex. Now just keep an eye on the tyre temperatures, especially the balance between tyre temperatures between the front and the rear, and how hot they get in general. Please excuse my terrible coffee throat there. And also keep an eye on the brakes, the brake temperatures front to rear, because we're going to do a little emergency stop test at the end of this set of laps. So we're coming round here to complete our out lap, and you'll see we got brake temps of just over the 300s and just about 200 on the rear, so about 3s to 2s on the front. Obviously they're cooled down now. At this corner they're going to heat right up to the 5s and 4s on the front, and the 200s and 300s on the back. So keep an eye on all of that. Now the tyres front to rear, as I said, this car starts off on tyre warmers, so they're already warm before you go out. The tyres front to rear, as you can see, the balance is, they all start off when you've got the tyre warmers on at about 71. And with the way the car's set up on the default setups, and I should talk about default setups as well during this little live stream, they've not changed out of balance too much. So you've got, they're about 4 degrees warmer at the back than they are at the front, and we're going to see how hot they get whilst testing. And whilst I'm completing these laps, I'll just say as well, here's one thing, whilst I've been testing with flip-flops, my mate Flip-Flops, we have found some real weird inconsistencies in the beta installations. He has exactly the same, we're both on the same beta, we've double checked, we're on the same build, everything. We've both validated our files. And yet, on my installation, in the McLaren GT4, not this one, the GT4, I can adjust in the suspension, I can adjust 2 of my dampers. I think that's fast rebound and fast bump, or fast rebound, and one of the rebound settings, one of the bump settings. But then also at the bottom you've got 2 more settings, fast bump, or 2 more bump and rebound settings, which on my installation are greyed out and non-adjustable. On Flip-Flop's installation, he's got a 3rd option. So one of the bump and rebound options he's got in there, it's not greyed out and he can adjust it. So isn't that weird? That's with us both being on the same installation, or rather the same beta, exact same beta, and we've both got different things. We're also getting different results, which is odd. Like I said, this is a beta, so there will be issues with the beta, but you would have thought we'd all be, you know, have the same problems and issues or options in a beta at least. So let's get back to these tyres. So I'm pushing it reasonably to get decent lap times here. You know, hard round the corners, hard on the brakes. And look at the tyre temperatures on the outside rights, which is what's going to get the hottest, and the outside right rear, that's going to be the hottest overall. They're in the 80s. Left side's rear's now in the 80s. Front left still in the high 70s. Okay, but as hot as we're getting is 87 to the rear. And as I'm going around as well, I'll just mention that default setups, I must say, on the beta at the moment, because they're working so hard on the tyre physics, you know, they're not getting time to rejig all of the setups, so you will find that default setups maybe don't suit cars like they used to, and maybe don't suit certain cars at all for certain tracks. That's to be expected, because they haven't, you know, I'm sure they'll rejig the setups once the tyre physics are finished, but also, as has been stated by the devs, the setup screen's there for a reason, so use it. Because even with the best default setup in the world for one track, it's going to be maybe unsuitable for another track. Right, so we've done 3 laps there, so we'll take that as a benchmark. 3 laps, and we're at 86 on the rear right. Generally in the 80s, in the mid 80s on the front right and left, front right and rear right, and on the left we're in the high and low 70s between the front left and rear left as well. So, you know, you can see that through my tyre widget there, and we're just going to keep going around for 1 extra lap. I'm not pushing it on this lap, I'm just sort of maintaining a decent speed, because I want to do this brake test to point something out as well, because I have found there's been some talk on the forums of people finding that the brake bias seems to have a bit of a forward leaning to make the cars feel good at the moment, as in people are setting their brake biases further to the forwards. I've always found that Automobilista 2 has more of a forward bias, in that the same setting, so if you had your brakes 50-50 in Automobilista 2, if you take something like ACC or R Factor 2, that would be, well, I'll show you what I mean at the end of this lap. So I'm going to do an emergency stop now. Watch my brake pressures. Watch the brake pressures, watch them, and slam them on. There you go. So front right up, just touched 700. Rears didn't get much higher than about 350. Okay, so on the right hand side, just went into 700 at the apex of braking there, the hardest point, and then came down into the 6s. The rears nearly got up to 4, but mainly stayed about half 3. Now, bearing in mind, that is with a brake bias of 57 to the front of the car, and this is what I'm talking about. You see, I've made a setup in here that I used exactly the same. I actually managed to get exactly the same settings in R Factor 2. I tried this in R Factor 2, and I've roughly tried it in ACC. Track heavily rub it in as heavily as go in each sim. Same, I managed to get the same, or within a degree or two, same track temperature, which is 40 degrees. So it's a really hot track, warming up those tyres. And what I found was that the default setup for this car in R Factor 2, the brake bias is actually 50-50 on the default brake bias. Okay. If I put it in R Factor 2 to 57 to the front, which is as far as you can go, because in R Factor 2, I think you can only go as far as 57 to the front, all the way down to 43 to the front, so more of a rearward brake bias. So you've got between 43 and 57 on the front. At 57 on the front, in that car, my brakes are well in the 700s on the front, and much, much lower on the rears. They're only going up to about 3. Whereas with this at 57 at the front, they're not getting as hot as the front. Now if I go to 50-50, it's a similar story. What I'm trying to say is that the brake bias in this sim, 50-50 in this sim, is like the equivalent of 57 to the front in both R Factor 2 and ACC, so I've found. And I'm only using those two sims as a basis for comparison because that's what I've been driving mostly at the moment. All those three. And it seems like when you actually look at what that brake balance is doing to the temperature of the brakes, because you can check the temperature in R Factor 2, and I can see at a balance of 50-50 that I'm getting much warmer brakes at the front. Naturally, you get hotter brakes at the front. Most cars use bigger brakes at the front. And colder at the rear, even on 50-50. Whereas to get the same brake temperatures in AMS2, you'd want to knock that up by 6, so 56 to the front, to even 8 to the front to get the same results. And this also has an effect on your tyres, because the brakes generate heat, which generates heat to the tyres, but also with the brake bias being more forward, you're putting more pressure on those fronts. And generally, I'm finding in R Factor 2 with 57 at the front, the tyres are much warmer at the front. If you watch what happens if I do a few laps here, now with the brake bias at 50-50, let's just sort out that, get our ABS and traction control at the same level. Right, so keep an eye on tyre temperatures and brakes. So 50-50 in R Factor 2, I'm still getting the front brakes nearly up to 700, but still only up to about 2.5, 3 on the rear in that emergency brake test. And the front tyres are generally at 50-50 the way the car's set up. I should actually do this with the setup that I made that was the same as the R Factor 2 setup for this car, or near enough the same. So, what did I call it? No, I'll stay with this one. This will do. We'll just do that brake test and then we'll move on to the next thing. Otherwise you'll all get bored. And everything will take too long. This isn't going to be all that much of a long stream tonight, because I meant to start doing this a lot earlier, but life has got in the way, and I've only got till about, I guess, 9 o'clock-ish tonight, or 9:30, till I'll have to shut down because I need to go and get me food, my dinner. Right, so we're at 50-50. Keep an eye on those brake temps. And I'm not so much concentrating on pushing the car at the moment and warming those tyres up. And remember that rear right tyre was at about 85 degrees for the next test we're going to do after pushing it for 3 laps. Just mainly the brakes we're concentrating on at the moment. So because of the setup, we've still got warmer rears than the fronts. Much warmer rears than the fronts because we're using 50-50 brake bias now. And then slamming on the anchors down here. See, we didn't really even get much past 6 on the front, but the rears are much warmer. They got into the 4s easily. Okay. So, one more lap with now the brake bias set. I'm actually going to go 60-40. So it's basically like if you had in R Factor 2, your brake bias range is between 57 to the front and about 43 to the front. So you got all that far. In Automobility 2, which does things differently to pretty much many, well, certainly to R Factor 2 and ACC, because you've only got a limited range in ACC for brake bias, you can go all the way to 100 to the front and 100 to the rear. But if you squash that down and said that, forget the numbers, that's just as far as you can go rear and front. The middle in ACC, if you've got the middle in R Factor 2 here, the middle in ACC seems to be that much more towards the front. Here's what I mean. I hope I'm explaining this well enough or in enough detail, but also not over explaining it as well, because I don't want to teach anyone to suck eggs or, you know, that sort of thing. So we're 60-40 now, 60 to the front. And you're going to see that we get a much warmer set of front brakes, but also probably a much warmer set of front tyres. But I need to be pushing to show that. So last time round we were roughly sort of, when we were at 72 on the front, we were about, or rather at 85 on the rear, we were about 81 on the front. So that's a difference of about 4. We're now 76 to the front, 77 to the rear on tyre pressures, or tyre temperatures rather. So we've got a much warmer set of front tyres now. And this is all going to come into, it's all going to make more sense when I drive the McLaren GT4. Slamming on the anchors. There we go. Front's just there. Front's right up into the 700s. Just touched it. Rear's much lower though, in the 290s, or, you know, just to the 300s. And that's more, that's at 60 to the front, whereas I can get the same result as that as you know, if I put the brake bars to about 52 to the front in R Factor 2, and also in ACC. And for those of you out there thinking, hang on a minute, you can't see your brake temperatures in, you can only see them graphically. So you get a bar next to your tyres which shows if the brake discs are cool, kind of a bluish colour, green up to temperature, or once they start going orange or red, they're starting to get too hot. I've used an application called Lovely Dash, which is used through SimHub, which actually is an exterior application, and that shows me the brake temperatures. So it's a similar story in ACC. Right, now that I've got all of that bump out of the way, so, oh, hello, hang on a minute, I've got a message from somewhere. Hello, Plantafar. What's changed in the new beta? Well, mainly tyre physics. This is going to be a short video. What you'll have to do is, because I'm sort of explaining my findings from the last stream, you'll have to go back and watch it from the beginning. But watch from now if you want, mate. But if you want to see sort of where I'm going with this, if you go back to the beginning, and it's all to do with, well, basically my findings. I found that the brake bias in Automobilista 2, what it actually heats, what it's actually transmitting to the brakes is about 6 or 8 clicks away from what it's doing in other sims. So if you're at 50-50 brake bias in R Factor 2 or ACC, to get the same brake temperatures front to back, and I'm not talking the same as in the brake temperatures the same, but the same as in other sims where it's, you know, you're generally more hot at the front, you'd want to set that to about either 56 or 58 or even maybe 60 to the front, because it's actually about 8 to 10 clicks to the front to get to the same brake temperatures. Anyway, so we now want to go to our GT4s. Now, this is going to show up a little bit of a problem with the tyres on the GT4. So remember, we're using exactly the same track, so the track will be the same temperature, quite warm, track temperatures at 40 degrees. But bearing in mind we're now in a GT4, slower car, doesn't start off with tyre blankets, and is running hard compounds. A hard compound should never get as hot as a soft compound, ever. Okay, so we're going to go to the default setup. And I did say when I was running this car last time round that it was feeling really good, but I wasn't really pushing hard and not for consistently over a few laps. Watch what happens to this car after you've got into about the third lap, in fact maybe even sooner, because what happens with this car, well, I'll just show you and you'll find out. So we're default setup, but as I've been testing to make it a good control test, we'll do ABS and traction control down to 1, because that's what I've been using. And as you can see, our tyres are very cold there, so we're starting out on non-warm tyres. But watch how quickly these hard tyres heat up. Okay? And particularly watch the balance between front to rear. So we're on the default setup, which is quite fast, but not necessarily good for a race. And I'm going to push it, okay? Oh, and plant far, one of the things that's new in the beta is we got a new layout of Barcelona, a third layout. I'll just mention that quickly for you there. Now look, you can see already our tyres are heating up quickly. We are on a warm track, but these are hard tyres, not soft compounds. And you can see that the rears are already warmer than the front, which is to be expected with this kind of setup. But just keep watching. Bearing in mind, we're only on the outlap. So to make it a control test, we'll do exactly what we did last time, which is our outlap and then 3 timed laps. And let's push it. Now I can get as low as about 128 round here, but I'm not going to get anywhere near that whilst I'm talking as well. I'm just not concentrating in the same way I mucked up that apex, for instance. Awesome. Glad you like that plant fair. If I'm pronouncing plant far right, I don't know if I am. So look at our tyres now. They're almost at tyre blanket temperature after just an outlap. Alright. Now, as I did in the last with the McLaren GT3, I'm pushing it, you know, using a bit of trail braking, that sort of thing, and accelerating hard out of the corners. So rear is now at 76, front's only at 72. Also, you can keep an eye on the brake temperatures as well, because very different with this car. Now the brake bias by default in this car is 62 to the front, 62 to the front. Okay. And I was saying this car felt good in my last stream, but I wasn't doing laps like I am now, pushing it consistently all the way around and for many, many laps. I was just sort of driving around. So we're on to our first time lap, 2 to go. And already we're up to 85 on the right rear. Now look at the tyre wear. Tyre wear is a big issue here, big thing. So we didn't have, you look at the tyre wear on the last, when I was driving the GT3 version, we didn't have a lot of it. We're already getting significant, we got very visible black bars there over the top of the green tyres. And Back end's just about staying in check. Needs a bit of lift off oversteer there. Power out. We're up to the 90s. We're up in the 90s now. That's hotter than we got. 96 on the rear right. That is hotter than we got with the GT3 on slick, on soft tyres. These are hard tyres. 95 on the rear right. We only got up to 85 on the GT3. I'm doing 1 minute 30s, which is slower than I can usually get around here, but as I'm concentrating on talking, you know, I said I would be slower. Now, remember, keep an eye on those brakes as well. Look at those brakes. They're almost equal. Almost equal, as in same temperatures on the fronts as that are on the rears. That's what I mean about that brake bias thing. But there's something else as well, which I don't think a lot of people realise. So third lap. Really pushing it. And look at those back rears. 102 on the back rear. That just got up to 100. There you go. 102. That is much hotter. Right, we've finished our 3 laps, so let's do our brake test at the end. Fronts, they're only marginally hotter than the rears. They're almost equal. Okay. So, the problem here that we've got is that at the moment, the GT4 tyres, which are hard, they should last longer than soft tyres on the GT4 because they're hard compounds. Or at least you would think. I could be wrong on this, feel free to disagree with me. I'm now letting the tyres go down a bit. But also, look at the wear. Much more wear, albeit only a little wear, but compared to the tyres on the soft tyres on the GT3, much more wear. But they got so much hotter. So, and I will be relaying this to Reeser, and please don't think that I'm doing this to say, oh look, this sim's got something wrong, because I'm doing this to help out the devs, because they have said, look, the tyres are a bit of a building site at the moment, and they did mention there may be issues with thermal dynamics and cars, certain cars acting well and certain cars not. So I'll be relaying the findings to them in a text-only message on the dev forums, show them what I found. But those tyres, I'm going to use this stream to reference to, so they can visually see it. But those tyres got much hotter, and also, look at that back end come around there with a bit of braking. What I find is, if I really, really push it now, so now we're going to go a bit further, because I've proved my point, but let's go a bit further and really, really push the car. There we go. The balance of the car has changed quite a bit. The balance of the car has changed. So I'm using the same. We're pushing. We're really pushing, but I'm not using any more trail braking than I used before. And now look at that. The back end. I'm gonna just lift off. That's just lift off. That's just lift off. And the back end's now coming around all the time. And to the point where I've even crashed into, or backed into the wall there. But look at those brake temperatures. Now, here's where things, here's where I'm going to try and get into something really interesting. So let's just keep an eye. Look at the backs are actually warmer than the fronts. They're actually warmer. Those brake. We're looking at the brake temperatures now. So if we come out here, right. Now, obviously, this McLaren, the GT4, is not in R Factor 2, so I couldn't compare it directly. So I compared it in ACC. and I'm not getting those rear brakes heating up as much. But that is what's changing the balance of the car, and after, you know, 3-4 laps, the back end's starting to come out. So how can you solve that? Well, what I did is I made myself a little setup, because the default setup for this, like I said, setups haven't been rejigged yet. They're just concentrating on tyre wear. So if you notice, the rear tyres are actually lower in pressure than the fronts by 5 bar, which means they're gonna get warmer quicker. Oh, I've got a message here. Hang on, let's have a look. It's great that you're doing these experiments to help reasons. Thank you very much, mate. Much appreciate that. G-Foil, hello G-Foil. Are you sure it's not lack of grip on hards that causes slip, wheel spin, heating and wearing on these tyres? No, definitely not, because I'm not pushing the car into sliding or anything like that. I'm driving to the limit of the tyres, just as I did with the GT3. So I'm not overdriving it any more than I would the softs. And you're going to see what I mean. You're going to remember G4. I think I don't know how long you've been watching, but you would need to see this stream from the start, really. So it's not going to be a long stream, but you know, go back and watch the whole thing and you'll really get what I'm talking about. But you'll see what I mean. I'll explain it. By the way, anyone out there who's watching who is not subscribed, if you find what I'm doing interesting and you want to see more, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps keep this thing going. But so yes, so what this setup has done, you'll notice that they're going to get warmer at the back because of the tyre pressures. Also take notice of these bump stop and rebound settings. And oh, just whilst I'll go back to that point that me and Flip Flop found out, on the same beta, 2 installs, one on his PC, one on my PC, same beta, same build. On my build I do not have, I've got slow bump and slow rebound. I do not have fast bump or fast rebound to adjust on this car. On his installation he's got fast bump as well as the other two here. He's got fast bump and it's adjustable. Go figure, right? So anyway, so take notice of all these settings. We're 15 bump stop on the rear, and then slow bump is 16 and 21, and our spring rates are exactly the same. Ride height is 96 at the rear, and then we've got our engine braking here. And don't take notice of these because I'm using these at 1 constantly. Engine braking is 4, which means more engine braking. And preload. Notice here, by the way, on this car, because this is where I'm going with this, you've got a preload, but on all of the other GT4s, you've got a preload and you've got clutches. You haven't got clutches on this. I'll come to that later. So let's load this setup. So I've called the setup problem solved. There we go. I'm loading that setup now. Now, you notice I've changed the default brake bias 68 to the front. 68 to the front. Okay. Also the anti-rolls I've made, it's 1 at the rear and 2 to the front. Brought up the engine braking to 10. Let's add our traction control and anti-lock brakes at 1 to make that equal. Done nothing with the preload here, but braking is there. And then in here I've taken out the rear bump stops and made both slow bump and rebound down to 16 and kept it heavier at the front. I think I left those alone, or possibly put slow bump up by 2, but I've left that one alone, left the bump stops alone. But the spring rate is 3 at the front, so a little bit stiffer at the front. And everything else is the same, apart from, where are we? Because we've got more forward brake bias. When I made this setup, I left it at 90, but then I ended up bringing it down to 80. So what I really want is 80. And you'll notice that our tyre pressures are the same front to rear. Watch what happens to the balance of the car now after a few laps. Oh, just before I go out, because I'll have to stop concentrating on the chat before I go out. Let's have a look. G-Foil don't have those fast dampers either on the GT3 on beta. This is the GT4. I haven't looked at actually the dampers on the GT3, but literally what I meant was their G-Foil is on this car, the GT4, on my installation. I've not got those fast bump settings. on my friend Flip Flop's installation. Same installation, same beta, you know, same build, just on a different computer. He's got them and they're adjustable. And he's getting different results as well. So anyway, watch what happens to the tyres and the bounce of the car now after 3 laps. So off we go. Now, first of all, as you might expect, seeing as what I did with the setup there, you are going to be seeing warmer front brakes, obviously, because the brake bias is more to the front. And you're going to be seeing more balanced tyres. The tyres will still get too hot, or in my opinion, far too hot, because these are hards. They're still going to wear too much. I'll pass this all by Reza. Like I said, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that hard compounds should not wear quicker than soft compounds, especially on a slower car, and also should not get hotter than softs. But I'm going to push it for 3 laps, so watch what happens. So hopefully we'll be in about the 130s, 129s again. This setup, it might be a tiny little bit slower than that first setup, but we should manage 130s or maybe 131s. Now look, already front right is just 1 degree or 2 degrees warmer than the rear right. Same, front left's at different temperatures, but the front left is hotter than the rear left. Just totally screwing up the hairpin there. I've seen another message, but I'm concentrating on the driving now, so if you just wait, as soon as I'm on the straight, I'll have a look. Renato did say that the soft dry compound are uploaded. Yes, I've already referenced that. So I've already referenced that earlier on in the stream, so it could be that because these are the hard compounds, they've not been fully updated. But then again, it's a bit contradictory because these cars are on the green list. And as in reply to that last message, that may be so, but generally I've found in most sims, they certainly, even if they run hot, they do not wear faster than softs ever. So they are now up to in their 80s, and we are doing 131. So I thought I'd be a little bit slower on this setup. Let's see if we can get a 130. And you'll notice that if you look at the brake pressures when I'm braking, we are now, because of that brake bias setting, we are now getting slightly warmer front brakes, but it's still much more so than, say, the McLaren GT3. We're still quite warm on the brakes at the rear. There's a reason for that. I'm going to come to that after we've done this test. But look at our tyre temperatures. So that's one out lap. And so you'll see our out lap there was 139.5. Then we've done a timed lap of 134, then a 131. So this is our third lap. And look, our tyres are nowhere near the temperatures they got up to. Remember, they got up to well over 100. They're 86, they're in the 80s now, much more balanced. I'll even do another lap. But they're much more balanced. Just a degree or two warmer at the front. 90 on the front now. Like I said, I could be wrong about these things, so do, contest me in the comments if you want with anything that I've said. Like I said, the cars are feeling great. I am preferring this setup that I've given it to the default setup, but like I said, Reza have not made new setups yet to suit the tyre physics. But look at how much more balanced we are, tyre temperature wise. And I've done an extra lap, and by doing the extra lap last time, it ended up so the balancer was changing and I was losing the back end of the car. Now, that ain't happening. And that's to do with a only slightly more understeery setup, but also to do with the fact that I've equalised the tyre pressures so the rears aren't running 5 bar less than the fronts, they're all the same. And we've got a very equal spread of tyre pressures there. I've left my braking a little bit late that time, that's down to me. I'm even going to go for another lap. We're also getting a little less wear as well. But still, even though we've got the brake bias much further towards the front, we've still got quite warm rears. As in brakes, not tyres. That's brakes I'm talking about. Okay, even if I go for an emergency stop, say here, look at those. There's a difference of about 200 between the front and the back brakes there, whereas it's quite a bit more than that in, say, the GT3. So, where am I going with this? Right, so why are those back brakes staying so warm? And why are we getting warmer tyres in the GT4? So, one thing I did notice, the GT3, its default tyres, now in the GT3, the tyres will go all the way up to 210 bar. That's your limit. In this car, they go all the way up to 200. However, the tyre pressures by default in the GT3 were set at about, it was either 170, I think it was about 178. 178 in the GT, and in this setup, they're at 155. And like I said, the setups now are all going to be out of kilter because they're just working on the tyre physics. Let's see what happens when we go to 178. See how much of a difference that makes. So obviously, we're going to have, as I'm about to prove, and nearly slide off the track, we've got a little less grip because we got higher tyre pressures. And the handling's going to firm up a bit, but the grip's going to be lower. So the car will be a little bit more slidey, especially until the tyres warm up. But we should be able to keep those tyres at a much cooler level now. And I'll go back through my setup before I end the stream tonight, so if you want to copy down settings you can. Like I said, you might not want to do that because the default setup, even though it cooks those rear tyres, it is fast. It's a good qualifying setup. But after about 4 laps, you've got to be careful with your trail braking. And I've still not come to the big part of the big discovery yet, which is, I just can't believe it. It actually shows off how detailed this sim is when I show you this. But yeah, you want if you to use that default setup for a race, you'd want to start off trail braking and then gradually ease off with the trail braking as the race goes on. I'll show you why that is later, but... So this is our out lap, and so lap 9 is our out lap, so lap 10 will be our first lap. And we want to do about 3. This is not one of my usual streams where I'm having fun racing and, you know, running a server, and there's lots going on for you to watch. This is... So I apologise if it's a little bit boring, but this is just more of a, you know, going into detail and trying to solve problems, or maybe not solving any problems at all, I don't know. But, discovery. This is a stream of discovery, and mainly so I can confirm my findings and report back to the devs. So again, our tyres are nice and equal front to back there, and still very even though we've got much more forward brake bias, we've got the thing that hasn't changed is those brake temperatures. They're still not far off each other front to back. So this will be the second lap. And we're in the 80s now. We're in the 80s now, even though it's 2003. Last lap for this test. No trail braking there, more engine braking. We'll do a little bit of trail braking here. And a little bit more here. So we're halfway through our third lap, and those tyre pressures are now much more under control in the 80s, much more like the GT3. So, and you know, it is a hot track, 40 degrees, so you'd want the higher tyre pressures maybe, as the setup is in the GT3. But that's not telling you what's going on with these rear brakes. And when you find out, well, I hope you're going to be as sort of intrigued as I am. Remember what I said about that diff earlier as well when I was showing you the setup. All the GT4s have a preload adjustment, and you can adjust the number of clutches. Not on this McLaren. Right, so there you go. We've kept the tyres a bit cooler by using those higher pressures. But again, look at those brakes. Look at those brakes. They're in the 3s. They're only 100 apart. Sometimes less. So why is that? Right, here comes the good bit. Before I do the good bit, I'll just come back to the chat and see what I've been missing. Oh, Steelcast27 is in here. Oh, Steelcast27 said it in the chat before I show it off. I'll be so disappointed. He would know. So let's see. Steelcast has said hard compound tyres will run hotter than softs. So they do. Okay, they are made for hotter track temps and more abrasive tracks. Okay, but what is with the wear? The GT3 isn't technically a soft tyre. It may say that in the UI. And I'm glad that Steelcast has jumped in here, because he can set a lot of this stuff to right. It isn't technically a soft tyre. It may say that in the UI, but it's an all-round tyre. They only use one compound in that series, which I do know that. They should last 60 to 120 minutes. Okay, the GT4 tyre hasn't been temp balanced yet, though. Ah, this is what I thought. I thought because, I mean, the GT4 tyre was getting... I don't know how, at which point you jumped into the stream here, but the GT4 tyre has been getting much hotter with the same amount of laps on the same track surface with the same heat on the same day. It's been getting much hotter. I mean, I'm talking a difference of 20 degrees after 3 laps. And where they are, this is the thing that really got me, because I'm pretty sure, please correct me if I'm wrong here, mate, hard tyres do not wear as fast as soft tyres, right? This is my general thought. No, I'm not working for Reza, Terraja Heller. I'm not working for them. I just love what they do. I love what all of the Sims do. R-Factor 2, Kunos, U397, you know, the guys at BMMG Drive. G4, is there some cap of how high the tyres can warm up on softs? I just couldn't get overheated when I tested the sprint car yesterday on one of the Brazilian tracks. Totally depends on the temperature that you were racing at, mate, because if I race that, even though I managed to get the temperatures up to about 104 earlier on that GT4, I took it to Imola the other day, and the track temperature was on a different day. It was about 16 degrees track temperature, and I was struggling to get them into the 70s. It does definitely depend on the temperature and also the grade of the track. Because Laguna Seca is going to be a bit rougher on tyres because of the grade and tarmac than, say, a really smooth track like Monza. Grade 1, modern, blah, 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 smooth tarmac. Steelcast. Oh, were you asking Steelcast if he's working for Razer? Yes, he is. And bloody good job he is as well, because he does a damn good job, especially on setups. Terj, if I'm pronouncing your name properly, I have one big gripe with AMS2. If you understeer, you can just turn the wheel more and get grip. Not so much now. This new beta is solving that. It's not working out the same way anymore. And the higher speed you go as well, when they lose grip, the front end loses grip. Steelcast actually prefers this type of balanced setup myself. Do you mean my setup? Are you saying you prefer my setup? The one that I've just made. If you do, I'm going to take that as a massive compliment. Thanks, mate. Because it's you. G-Foil, not anymore in beta. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So, yeah, G-Foil's agreeing there. So, Terj there, you've heard it from me, you've heard it from G-Foil. That's been eliminated. Oh, excellent. That's brilliant. You've got that. Good Steelcast and Reza. Bravo, Reza. Steelcast's Renato's next dev update might elaborate on this subject a bit further, but the subject of temp and wear is not lost. And as I said, as I said at the start of the stream, I said do take in mind everything I'm doing here is on beta, and Renato has already stated that there are still issues with thermodynamics. Basically, what the new tyre model has been working on, tyre tread adjustments, have been mainly to do with grip coefficients under slide. So he did say that take everything as a bit of a building site at the moment. Kevin M, hello Kevin mate, how you doing? You're doing the testing I wish I had time for. Hey man, no problems, I've got the time at the moment, so not many gigs coming in, so hoping to get out more in the evenings playing bit more soon, but I've got a new car, so I can get out to gigs now, and it's an estate, so I can get all my gear in it. And the other day I found out how to turn the ESP off on the car. I've never had a car with ESP. Don't like it. Interferes. I turned it off the other day. The car got actually faster as well, which is unexpected, but now drives like a car. Hello Ravenous, how you doing mate? Steelcast 27. Hard tyres last longer than softs. That is correct, yes, so they are wearing a bit too fast. And Steelcast does like my setup. Thank you, mate. I tell you what, honestly, please, the setup screen is there for a reason. Even if Reza never change the default setups from what they are at the moment, even if they never bring out specific setups for specific setups, look, you don't get that in every sim. You only get that in ACC, which has got a limited amount of cars and tracks. R-Factor 2, you don't get any setups, and the default setups are sometimes horrendous for a certain track. The Radical GT3 is one of the worst examples from that. Rebounds setups are all over the shop in that. You have to spend some time setting it up. So, and if you don't want to go into the totally advanced setups, just use the basic setup screen and just, adjust it via your anti-roll bars, brake biases, and things like that, and your downforce. But if you do want to go to those advanced setups, you can really completely change the behaviour of a car. For instance, anyway, I'll go to that later. I've got to get to what I want to show you. Terj, if you want to get onto the beta, I don't know if it's still open to people, you need to join the Paddock Club. To do that, basically it's like paying for a season pass. You'll need to pay 80 quid. I don't know if they're still doing it, but you'll need to pay 80 quid. And that gets you all of the next year's coming content, all of the DLC that's coming, all of it. Also gets you Automobilista 1 for free, or Automobilista, standard Automobilista, and gets you access to the Paddock Club and more. Anyway, right, this is what I want to, and I really want to hear what Steelcaster's got to say about this, because I found something out about this car. Right, so let's go back to the pit box, and oh god, I've got a pitman's thing in my way there. Right, so here's why those rear brakes get hotter in this car, and you get that change of balance after a few laps, more so than any other GT4, let alone the GT3s, right? Now, as I said earlier, and for this test, as I said earlier, it's very important to look at your rear differential here, because as I said earlier, all of the GT4s have got preload and clutches adjustments. You've got no clutch adjustments in here, only preload. Okay? And now we're going to get to why that may be. Because it turns, well, it's just one of the clever things that Reza do. Now, Reza actually made a very small point, I don't know how many people saw it, about this feature for another car. But I didn't realise it would be on this car. So, to show you what I mean, I'm going to go to my brake bias here. And because Automobilista 2 actually lets you go as far as 100% brake bias to the front. I've got 100% brake bias to the front now, so no matter what I do, even if I hit the brakes, we shouldn't get any temperature differences, really. We will get a slight temperature difference on the back, depending on how high the tyres heat up, which transmits to the brakes, but only a couple of degrees worth. We shouldn't get any change in the rear brakes. So look, we're on 26. We've got cold everything, cold brakes, cold tyres. The brakes are all at 26, okay? Or 27. I'm going to start pulling away. I'm going to go round a few corners. I'm going to stay in first or second gear so I don't have to brake anywhere. Watch what happens to those rear brake temperatures. Watch this. Now, did you see there already the rear right has gone up to 30. I haven't touched the brakes. You can see from my inputs here, look. I'm not touching the brakes. Right? So our front brakes are not changing at all, yet our rear ones are. Let's slow it down with a bit of engine braking. Now watch what happens when I corner and use the accelerator at the same time. Look at that number going up on the outside right rear. We're only looking at the rear brakes here. And I'm not using any brakes at all. Right, let's go a little bit faster. And boot it a little bit. Look at that! And you might be thinking to yourself, hang on a minute, that seems a bit of a problem. The brakes are going nuts. The rear brakes, I'm not using the brakes at all, and they're going nuts. They went up to 100 degrees there for a split second on the rears. I've gone a little bit too fast. I'm going to have to use the brakes. Sorry. So I've just used the brakes there everywhere. But keep an eye on those rears, right? I'm not going to touch the brakes again. Just keep an eye on those rears. Now, there's not a problem, right? There's not a problem with the brakes, okay? There's no problem. There's no issue with the software here, right? Now, I'm going to explain what it is in a minute. Remember, this is a McLaren. Look at that. We're at 140 on the outside, right? Right, going to go around this corner a bit faster and bring it right in. Look at that. If you're wondering, this is why your rear brakes get quite warm or toasty in this car, even with a front bias to the front. And you should have a front bias to the front in this car. I'm going to explain why. The reason those brake temperatures are changing, even when I'm not touching the brakes, apart from the racing cars, apart from the, you know, your GT3 racing cars, all road-going McLarens, for quite some time now, do not have a rear differential. They do not have it's an open diff. What they have is an E-diff, and they have McLaren brake steer. Okay, which is kind of a bit like torque vectoring, but not quite the same. So the diff is controlled by the brakes on the road cars. However, the GT3 McLaren, because it's a good system, but in certain respects, especially for racing, still not as good as an LSD, as I understand it. And I can see why this is. So, what's happening is, I've got, if I go and set my, right, you can adjust this, but you're not actually adjusting the preload on limited slip differential there. You're adjusting the electronic braking. So at 0, you're going to see less of a difference as I corner, because it's going to let the wheels rotate more freely. So you'll see less braking going on each wheel. Just keep an eye on those rear brakes, that's all we're looking at. I'm not going to use the brakes. Remember, we'll be getting up to about 150 on the rear right earlier. So let's go around and we'll use a bit of throttle as we come round. So to activate that braking, I'm using a bit of throttle, but that only went up to, there's only a difference of 2 degrees. Or rather, sorry, look at the tyres. So 61 to 48 on the outside left to outside right. Let's go around this corner, and as we go round, apply throttle. Okay. Up to about 112 is as high as we got. And we'll just have to use the brakes for this corner a little bit. Taking them off though, so you're just seeing what that electronic diff is doing. Now the reason I'm surprised about this, see, you'll see that there's not much difference. So they're not applying the brakes so much. Now if I go back into edit setup and then let the preload go, Automobilista 2 goes from 0 to 500 Newton meters. In the McLaren or the GT3 McLaren in R Factor 2, it's like 0 to 48, and it just says hardest at 48. So ignore the numbers; it's just a scale. 0 is as open as possible, and 500 is as locked as possible. In R Factor 2, 0 is as open as possible. 48 is locked. Anyway, so watch those numbers change now. Terz, you're in the paddock club. You have access to the beta, mate. You already have access to the beta. But I'll come back to that. So you can get on this, mate. Now, look at those brakes now. When I corner, there's going to be a bigger amount of braking to keep the wheels rotating at a similar level. There you go, so round this corner, and as we go round we'll apply a bit of throttle. So we should see braking more on that outside and inside wheel. Right, round we go. So over 118 there. Just dab the brakes before we go around this corner and apply a bit of throttle. So the temperatures now, they're staying even. Well, you should get more braking on one wheel to keep it less open. But it actually doesn't seem to be working. Actually, I didn't notice that before. It doesn't seem to be working. So, actually, I'm not sure if that preload is working at all, and I really need Steelcast input on this, because I tell you what, I'm at 500, okay, 500. Now, obviously, a limited slip differential works much more differently to, an e-brake, McLaren's braking. But why is it on this car? Because I've done a bit of research. Now, the McLaren GT4 in iRacing has a limited slip differential. You can change it and it'll do exactly what is expected. I've checked the numbers as well. I can't check it in R Factor 2 because there is not a version of this car or any other car that has an e-braking system. However, here's the weird thing. In Assetto Corsa Composizione by Kunos, I've taken that McLaren out. And with an E-diff, you'd expect that you wouldn't maybe you wouldn't have. Let's just go back to a more sensible braking bias. Yeah, with the McLaren in ACC, your braking bias is non-adjustable and it is set 60-40. Okay. Also, when you go into your setup screen, you have absolutely no way of adjusting the preload. The preload is just set it. It says 0, but actually you can't adjust it. So we don't know what it's set. You can't adjust it at all. Which suggests that it's running, even though it's the racing version, it's running the McLaren brake e-braking system. However, I wanted to see if it was really doing it, because Autumn Ballista 2 is doing that. And even if it's, because I think there are 2 versions of the GT4 of this car, but I have heard that one of them runs the open diff with e-brake, and one of them runs a limited slip differential. So whether this is accurate or not, what this does prove is that Reza can simulate something that not a lot of other sims are doing. Okay, which is your e-braking, and also that comes into things like torque vectoring as well, which is a different story, but it's related to this because it uses the brakes. Now, the McLaren Senna, you've got the road-going version of the McLaren Senna in this sim, and that definitely does, by McLaren's own specifications, the road-going version does run an e-diff. And it does work. It does, and they made... Here we go, I'm going to show you. Reza, when they brought out the McLaren Senna, which is another car that's feeling a heck of a lot better than it used to, by the way, in this beta. And these are the only 2 cars you'll find it on. Okay, so let's find our Senna. Here we go, hypercars. There's our Senna. This is not the Senna GTR, the track version. This is the road legal Senna, just McLaren Senna. This definitely does use your McLaren E-diff and brake steer setting. So it's going to brake more on the inside wheel to help you corner. You'll see it working on this as well. Have a look. Watch those brakes. I'm not going to touch your brakes. Just watch the rears. That's your diff. See, the numbers are going up and down as I turn. Right? So that's got it on there. And even on this car, you've got adjustable preload and power ramps and coast ramps. So I don't know if Steelcast is still in here. Should we have those settings? Because I know you can adjust. I think you can electronically adjust how much the brakes grab, but there's no preload as such. Because if you take let's go back to our GT4s. If you take a car with a normal limited slip differential, so we go to our GT4 and we'll take our Porsche here. Right, normal limited slip differential on this. The E-diff is going to be okay at slowing wheels down, but it's not going to be good at locking them up under acceleration so much, I wouldn't have thought, as a limited slip differential has. So if you take a limited slip differential, you can lock it up all the way with as many clutches as you like, take it all the way up to 500 Newton meters, and basically try and lock it as much as possible. And so you should be able to do donuts very easily now and get it sideways very easily. This is why drift cars use welded diffs and LSDs, but cheap ones use loaded diffs. So we've got a fully locked up diff here, or as far as it'll go. Right, go for a donut, and first gear, no problems. Second gear, no problems. So there you go. Right now, if we go back into the pits, and it's still not going to be impossible to do a donut because we've got a very powerful car, or a reasonably powerful car here. But we were literally spinning like a top there, so I've unlocked the diff as far as it will go. So we've got 0 preload and 2 clutches. That doesn't mean it's totally unlocked, totally open diff, but it's as low as it'll go. Turge, but you can try the E-diff on both the McLaren, oh sorry, as it's intended to be on the McLaren Senna, but also it was never stated that it was actually on the McLaren GT4, but that's what it's doing. The GT3 as McLaren has definitely got a normal diff. Right, so watch this now. I'm going to try and do a donut with the diff much more opened up. There you go, much harder. So it's still doing a bit of a donut, but it's mostly spinning the inside wheel there. Okay, and just to see an example of that, so we can go to the replay. Here's what happened with a fully locked up diff. Not the best camera angle in the world, but round and round and round it goes, spinning on a dime, lots of tyre smoke. And then if we go to our more open diff setup, actually it's going to be, we can't see the car at all there, so we'll go to the chase cam. But as you'll see, can we see it? Oh, we can just about see it. So here I go, about to put my foot down, wheel turned hard to the right. Come on! Come on! I want my example. Hurry up. Did I really sit there for that long? Oh, there we go. I'm moving. Look at that now. I'm really struggling. Doing a very wide donut there because if we go to the chase cam, you'll... Right, so let's quickly wind that back. You all know this about diffs. You know what I'm talking about. I don't need you to teach it to suck eggs. You can see the inside wheel is just spinning like crazy there. So let's now come back to our McLaren. And whilst I'm loading up the McLaren again, I'm just going to come and see what I've missed in the comments here. Ford Fiesta ST in the game. Why? Because that car's got torque vectoring. Hello, just posted. How on earth are you, mate? Just posted. If you've only just jumped into the stream, it's not going to be too long a stream tonight because I've only got a certain amount of time tonight. But I would recommend that you go and watch this stream if you get the time. If you watch this stream sort of from the beginning to the end, at some point there's some interesting stuff in here. And I'll try and explain some of it now that you're here as well. You're going to like this, mate. So let's go back to our McLaren. Just to bring Just Posted up to speed, what we're talking about here is just little issues I've found with the tyres. Bearing in mind that this is a beta, as I've said to everyone, and Renato has stated, you know, take this one with a pinch of salt because it's still a construction site. Everything is feeling... I've already done a stream earlier during the week. Everything's feeling much better. Much better. But there's just some discrepancies in terms of tyre wear and tyre heating, which still Cast27, who's been in here, has actually confirmed that, yes, these are still issues. But I sort of half thought they would be because we were told by Renato there'd be thermodynamics issues. But I also discovered something really interesting about the McLaren GT3. So just GT4, sorry. So just posted, it's got an E-diff on the back. It's got an E-diff. So the only car in this game, and I haven't found another sim which simulates this properly. I have not found another sim which simulates this properly. But the McLaren Senna, when it came out, not a lot of people realise that has an E-diff, unless you really know McLarens. All road-going McLarens these days do. And the McLaren Senna is an E-diff. I can't test this in R Factor 2 because that's got a McLaren Senna, but it's the GTR version, which is the track version, which I believe does have a limited slip differential. The GT4 is a bit of a weird one because, as I understand it, the GT4, there are a couple of different categories of GT4 in different parts of the world, and apparently one of them uses the road-going version E-diff and the other one uses a limited slip, because the McLaren GT4 in iRacing definitely uses a limited slip. But there is a McLaren GT4 in ACC, but I can't work out what that one's doing because you can't adjust the differential in ACC at all. But I did check whether the back brakes were actually working, because seeing as you can't adjust it, it does suggest you can't adjust brake bias or the diff, which suggests it's running the E-diff, because you can't adjust it like you can on all the others, or at least your preload. You can only adjust the preload in there. But I used, because you can't see, you can see your brake temperatures graphically represented in colours, but you can't see what they're actually running. I used an external program to tell me what temperatures the brakes are. And the brakes do nothing when you're not braking, if you're just accelerating. And they should be grabbing away if it's being controlled by an E-diff. Watch this, I'll come to my other point about this car in a moment for everyone else. But just posted, watch the rear brakes. I'm not going to use the brakes, so all the brakes should be staying at 29 degrees. Or heating up by a couple of degrees just with movement. But look, the fronts will do nothing, but the rears, the numbers start going all over the place as soon as I start turning and using the throttle. And that's because this car is using, it's using McLaren's brake steer and E-diff. Watch if I do a... Look at that. Look at how hot the inside brake disc is getting. Right? There you go. Didn't realise about about this car, but it just proves how intricate this game engine is, really. It can do things like that. But the other thing that, going back to before Just Posted joined, so this thing about I'm not sure whether this setting here actually means anything anymore. This is a preload of 500, so fully locked diff. So let's turn off all of our traction control and anti-lock brakes. And this time, I'm going to go a little bit further over the hill so we can actually see on the replay what happens here. Right, so we've got a setting of fully locked, and like I said, as I understand it, you can play about with the electronic adjustments of how much the brakes interact with the wheels on an E-diff, but it doesn't work in the same way as an LSD under acceleration. Not quite the same. So it's going through an open diff with brake steer, fully locked up in settings. But here's a donut. First gear donut, and we are spinning right at the top. I've just put it into second gear, and that's as much as it's got. I'll stay in first gear. Spinning like a top. Absolutely no problems. Okay, so we come back to the pits. Edit setup. Now let's take this. I don't even know whether to call it preload setting anymore, because I'm just not sure if it should be there or not. Now, we saw a big difference with the cars with a limited slip differential. In that Porsche, it was extremely hard to do a donut, or at least a, you know, turn on a sixpence kind of a donut with diff as open as it would go. In this car, I can feel a little bit of a difference there. It stuttered a couple of times, but generally the same. So I think with the E-diff, it's much more effective under cornering. And this is what I don't know because I haven't tried this out yet. So I'm gonna now go and do a few laps. So am I on my setup that I like? Yes, I am. Okay, good. Let's keep that diff open there. What did we do with the brake bias? We need to go back to 68 to the front. I would recommend setting your brake bias 60 to 70 to the front in this car, because you're already getting braking around the corners from your E-diff in this car. So unlike other cars, you want much more forward brake bias to keep this car stable as things warm up. Just because of the nature that an E-diff and McLaren's braking system works. I don't know if this is going to change, if they will put an LSD, or if Reeza will put an LSD on this one, or if it's meant to have it or not. I think you get the idea of what I'm saying. But I'm going to go round and find out now, because most of this has been stuff that's I've already concluded. I'm going to find out what I don't know, which is how it handles with that electronic diff at a setting of 0 and then at a setting of 500. Before I do, I just haven't looked at the chat in a while. I'm just going to come and, because I've got the chat in a different window, so I'm going to come and say hello in the chat. What have I missed? So Joe just posted, has said, glad you aren't doing a live server because then I'd be gutted that I couldn't join. This is perfect. I'll go and have a play with the beta on my own later. Do you know what? I could run a beta server one night because I found out that I can run a server in the beta. So you can join as long as it's in the beta. In fact, what time are we at? As I said, I didn't have much time. Oh, probably got another 3/4 of an hour. Might do that. Tej says maybe the GT4 car has a race E-diff, so a bit different from the road car. Exactly. I don't know. I've got to clarify this with Reeza. But it's just amazing to see that, you know, to see the simulation doing that. Right. So we've got our open diff now. Let's see how we get on over the course of a couple of laps. So I won't be looking at the chat now, guys. I'll be concentrating on what the car's doing. But I will come back to you. So I'm going to expect turning to be an easier, or I'm going to expect the car to turn in better than with it sort of locked up, and I'm going to expect trail braking to be very effective, maybe even too effective, because I'm sort of trying to simulate almost an open diff. It is turning in quite nicely. Tyres haven't warmed up yet, obviously. I do hope Steelcast, I think he's gone now, but I hope he relays. That's turning in very easily. I hope he relays some of this information that we've discussed tonight back. I'm sure he will actually, because he seemed quite interested. And I'm glad to know that some of the things I've discovered or had a hunch about, I was kind of at least half right about. But I have learned something I didn't know today, which is that hard tyres run warmer than soft tyres. Actually, it makes sense actually, because road tyres, on your normal road tyres, can get as hot as you like on a road car, but not wear terribly. Whereas you get a soft slick too hot, and it'll wear like crazy. Right, anyway, I'm waffling now. Right, let's try a bit of trail braking. Oh, that's turning in very easily. So it does seem like maybe that setting is doing what it should do so far. Trail braking, really trail. Oh, look at that. That's really turning in. And I'm on my setup, which makes it easier to understeer a bit more as well. Yeah, trail braking is really... I'm trail braking deliberately a bit too much, and it's really bringing that back end round. I've got to shout out and thank Flip Flops for all the testing we did together last night, by the way, because we kind of he inspired me to go and look at a few things, because we couldn't work out why we were having such different experiences. That is another thing. The beta does seemed... it could just be the difference in our driving styles, but he was getting the tyres very hot. Like, as I said, the tyres seemed to get a little bit too hot, but they were getting very, very hot in his sim. And also, he's got different setup options in the same beta as me. That's one thing we really discovered, which we know certain installs on certain people's PCs are working different to certain installs on other people's PCs. It's just the weirdest thing. He's got an extra setup option which I don't have on the same build, same beta. Yeah, I'm over trail braking there, and the car's turning right in to the point where I'm just skidding it round. So let's lock that up now. Ah, Steelcast is back in the chat. I'm really interested to see what he's got to say. Just posted, says it's pretty cool, somewhat beyond his knowledge. A little bit beyond mine, but I've done a lot of research on the subject. But I did know about the McLaren E-diff, which I just didn't think it was on the racing car. So Steelcast27 is saying, and thanks for coming back and getting back to us about this, mate. Diffs on the GT4s are managed by regulation. They have to use the factory diffs with only preload adjustments only. Right, I've got some good news for you, Steelcast. Our diff on the 520 emulates this rule, even though technically the 520 does not have preload technically. Right, okay, right, here we go. So obviously the preload setting is still there because you can still adjust the diff electronically from in the car, so how much the brakes will grab, because I believe you can adjust that, but it's just not called preload and it's not got the same value. So that's why it's making a smaller difference. But I have to tell you, mate, iRacing has a GT4 McLaren. And in iRacing, it has an adjustable preload. So, because from what I've heard, there is... I don't know if I'm correct about this, but there is a certain class... There are several classes of GT4. And in one country, they actually allow them to use... the McLarens to use a limited slip if they want to fit it, so someone told me. But in, say, the British GT and the World GT, you have to run the open diff. But also, here's something really interesting for you. In ACC, in Assetto Corsa Composizione, I love all of these sims that I'm talking about, by the way. I just noticed they all do things slightly differently. You can see the actual brakes working. You can feel them and you can see them working on the diff, as I've just proved, without using the brakes in Automobilista 2. So Automobilista 2 is simulating the e-brake properly. If you go into ACC, the Premier GT simulator, in Assetto Corsa Composizione, if you go into the setup, you cannot set the preload at all, and you cannot set the brake bias. And that was one thing I wonder why you can set the brake bias in AMS2, because I wouldn't have thought you'd be able to on a car with an open diff. But anyway, that's set 60 to the front by default, but you can't adjust it, which makes sense for that car in ACC. However, it's not simulating the open diff, because in ACC your brake temperatures are represented by coloured bars, so it's hard to see the numbers. However, if you use SimHub and use one of the sim dashes, which can take the telemetry from the sim, you go and run that car using that dash, and you can see your brake temperatures. And the brake temperatures will go up and down as you brake. Nothing happens to the back brakes if you don't use the brakes at all. No matter how much throttle you use on cornering, nothing happens. So it turns out that AMS2 is simulating that e-diff properly, and ACC is not. There's a discovery, eh? Go figure. I can't test in Assetto Corsa because some of the cars in that don't even output brake telemetry data, and there's no way of seeing the brake temperatures in it anyway. But you can on a couple of the cars, but they never implemented it on all of them. And obviously, AC's got a lot of McLarens, so maybe they just do it in a different way. Maybe they fudge it a bit, but it's done so properly in AMS2. I've got to see what else he's written. E-diff on the emulates the rule. Yeah, I've read that. Steel Cast 27. The road car is more free for the user. The terms preload and ramps is simply a matter of nomenclature. Nomenclature? Do you know what? I've got no idea what that... Nomenclature. I don't know what that means. Devising or choosing names for things. Yes, that is what I thought. That is what I thought. So, you know, as in, you know, when R factors, you know, it's why I say sometimes ignore the numbers between sims, because R factor will tell you that a diff is as open as possible at 0 and as closed as possible at 48, and those numbers don't really matter. That's the range, and in ACC it's 0 to 500, and that's the range. They could be the same range exactly, they're just counting it in different numbers, and of course R factor goes up in degrees of 1, and ACC's got a bigger number there, 0 to 500, but it goes up in degrees of 5, so it all equals out. I'm so glad you got back in here and came and confirmed this stuff for me. Right, so we've just getting. Thank you so much, mate. It's really good to hear from you. And we've just done the test with that preload setting at 0. Let's see what happens at with it up to 500. I'm expecting it to be a much less intense or severe or as big a difference as opening up an actual LSD, but I'm expecting a difference. I'm expecting the turn-in not to be as good and trail braking not to be as effective with that setting higher. And steel cars, of course, feel free to come in and say anything at any point. Love the fact that you're here. So with a bit of trail braking around here earlier, it's not turning in so much. Just get the tyres a little bit warmer maybe. Initial thoughts, it's not as big a difference as adjusting an LSD, but it is making a difference. So that setting is working. I'm really trail braking all the way around there. You can see my input. And earlier on, the car was going right to the inside of the corner. Oh, overdid it a little bit there. That's come round. So that unconvinces me a little bit. On that note, with what you just said, Steelcast, I do notice that the McLaren Senna has a preload but also coast and ramp settings. I did find that a bit odd. Because that's the E-diff as well. Right, so braking about here, turning in, and it's going much wider. I can still get it. I can still abuse the trail braking and brake too hard and make the back end brake traction, but it's much more stable under braking, as you would expect with something that's trying to be a more locked diff. And it was really obvious around Rainy Curve earlier, so this is Rainy Curve, named after a motorcyclist. Yeah, I think there is a difference happening there. Steel Cross 27 is back. The Senna has no regulations, so is a matter of game design to allow players to adjust it. Right, yeah, that makes total sense. Right, so back to that setting being as more of an open diff situation than a locked one. It is amazing. We're actually, you know, we've literally got one of the devs of the game in here talking us through this. So, using too much trail braking this time round. I've got to let the tyres warm up to where we were going earlier. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that setting definitely makes a difference. This corner here. So, braking from about here. Keep applying the brakes. And look at that turning. Look at that turning like that. Just lightly trail braking from about 100 yards before the corner, 80 yards before the corner. On that left-hander there, and it just turned right in so easily. And it's just so much of a different story. So, the moral of the story, I guess, with this car is... I don't know, Steelcast, would you agree with this? Because I don't know if either the Senna with an E-diff, I don't know if... Because obviously, ACC isn't simulating this quite correctly. But they may have fudged it and are simulating it in a different way. But they're definitely not simulating it in terms of the brakes. But... they may have got it right that you can't adjust, or you can't adjust the brake bias. Should you be able to adjust the brake bias on a car with an E-diff? Because obviously it's going to... Right, let's just try that again. Yeah, it's just not doing the same thing. Should you be able to adjust the brake bias on a car with an E-diff when... If you adjust the brake bias beyond a certain percentage, because you'd want more concentration on the front because you've got the brakes are going to be used more on the rear by the E-diff. Should you be able to adjust the brake bias? And if you can, would you agree with the fact that it's a good idea to set the brake bias quite far forward? In fact, I'd go as far as to say, with my setup here, set it 70-30. Because a lot of cars, you're just going to look up the fronts a lot with a 70-30. I mean, like I said, I think that in general... a brake bias setting, I'm talking about for any car, a brake bias setting of 60 or between 66, I'd say between 68 and 70, sorry, between 58 and 60 to the front is this, produces the same actual brake temperatures as a setting with the same car in, say, R factor 2 of a setting of 50-50. It's always slightly more forwards in AMS2. But with this car, certainly, even with AMS2, that is generally too far forward. But look, if I drive this now on my setup with the brakes now set literally 70-30. It's not just going to be front lock up understeer settee. It's still turning in brilliantly because of that E-diff. And because I'm not going to heat up as the brakes do heat up under braking as well as under what the E-diff's doing, my car is not going to start changing its balance after about 3 or 4 laps and losing the back end because the rear brakes just get more efficient than the fronts because of the heat. In fact, I'm even going to turn off the ABS completely and traction control. Well, no, it's brakes we're concentrating on, so I'll turn the traction control back on to 1. But even with the ABS off, 70-30 in a normal car, you'd expect to just be locking up the fronts all the time. I'm not locking up the fronts. It's not completely understeering, it's turning in because that e-brake is doing its thing. It's amazing. Look, there you go. I can even trail brake it enough, applying the brakes, that you'd expect it to understeer it with 70-30, but because that E-diff is turning in nicely. once again, thank you so much to Steelcast27, because what you've done tonight, mate, is confirmed, set my mind at rest, because you confirmed to me that my suspicions about temperatures and wear were at least half right. But I also have learned something from you, as in that I didn't realise that hards ran at a higher temperature, but it does make sense when I think of road tyres. But you've also confirmed that this is running the E-diff, which is the main thing that I've discovered, because I knew that about the Senna. I know it may have passed a lot of people by, because it was only released, it was only briefly mentioned in the patch notes when the Senna was introduced, only briefly, or in the dev update, only briefly noted that we have the McLaren Senna, which uses a lot of complicated systems, including the McLaren e-brake, which is properly simulated in Automobilista 2. I don't know how many people caught that, but nothing was ever said about the McLaren GT4. So I was, when I noticed what those brake discs were doing on the back end for the first time, I was like, what's going on here? What's going on here? Hang on a minute. It's a McLaren. It's a racing McLaren, the GT3. Oh yeah, that's a question I could ask you. Why is it that the GT3 is allowed to have a limited slip differential, and because the McLaren GT3 car, as I believe, does have a limited slip differential, even though the road going version doesn't. Steelcast27 says brake bias limitations. I'll have to look into. As far as I know, it's undocumented. Yeah, I know what you mean, because I've been through so many sites. I've been through McLaren's site as well, and I can't find that. Even in car specs, and for certain cars, they don't let you have the technical specs. You have to register an interest in the car. Like if you go for if you look at the Senna, you can download the technical specs. You can look at them. If you look at the Senna GTR, you have to register interest in the car. You can't even get the technical specs. You'll have to look into that. It's undocumented. The 520s used to have a clutch LSD. So this may be a bit of a carryover. Right, so that might explain why in iRacing the GT4 has a normal LSD. And it might explain why Assetto Corsa Composizione aren't... There's not... I've already proved to myself that there's nothing going on with the back brakes, so it's like it's not using an e-diff. But, unlike every other GT4, it will not let you adjust the brake bias or the preload. Well, at some of the cars you can't adjust the preload, because maybe you just can't adjust the preload on that, because that adjustment is just not there in that mechanical version of the clutch. So that might be running. So ACC might have actually in fact got it right, or Kunos rather have got it right and simulated that properly. It's just that for some reason they don't give you brake bias adjustments on that car, or clutch limited slip biases. But as far as I know, guys out there, the most interesting discovery about all of this is, and it's not really discovery because, you know, if you bought the game and didn't look at the forums, you wouldn't know that Automobilista 2 does simulate e-brakes, because you wouldn't have even read that dev update when they bought the McLaren Senna in, small as it was, but it was there, stating that it uses an e-diff which is properly simulated in Automobilista 2. You just wouldn't know that the game can do that, and you certainly wouldn't know it can do it on the McLaren that's not even mentioned that it's got it. So let's see, what time are we at the moment? I hope folks have found this interesting. I certainly have, especially with Steelcast getting it, and all of the other other people have brought up good points as well. Like who was it earlier who said about the someone asked me, yeah, G-Foil asked, was I sure that it's not lack of grip on the hards that's causing them to get hotter because I'm wheel spinning or sliding? That's a good point, but because there are so many variables that can change the heat in the tyres. So if you're on less grippy tyres, then you might slide more. But yeah, as I said earlier, that wasn't the case, because in both cars I was staying within the limit of the tyres. So yeah, what's the time again, Mr. Wolf? 20:46. I did say I wasn't going to be running this stream for very long, because I've got to jump in my new car and go into town and get myself some food. And where I'm going will shut at, yeah, I've got time. I've got plenty of time before they shut, actually. In my new car that I've only just found out how to turn the ESP on, I've turned it off, and now it's driving like every other car because I've only ever had basic cars, and it drives like them now. I don't like ESP on my car. I want it off. There are things I want to do that it won't let me do. Oh, message from Steelcast. Will do, mate. Great to hear from you. And yeah, I'll try and keep the devs. Well, you're updated now because you are a dev, so I don't now have to make a dev report about all of this stuff. But I'll put my notes on the forums anyway. But thank you for all of your information. Love you, mate. Thanks for coming along. And I guess seeing as now I've gone over all the points that I needed to, in my last stream, I did notice that the much like what they've done with the Stock Car 23, that now doesn't seem to have a low speed grip issue. But I looked at that in the last stream. You can always go look at my last stream for that. But the tyres do seem to overheat really easily, but maybe that's just how stock car tyres are. And that is going around an oval as well, so you expect that's the outsides that are overheating. Right, so what I shall do with my extra time here today, for your enjoyment, and mine as well, by the way, is let's go and have a look on the... Well, let's have a look at the forum. What's going on over at the forum for a start? Oh, nothing much in terms of new posts. Right, let's maybe have a look at one of the cars that's on the updated tyre list that I've not really tried yet. So I believe I tried the Porsche. I tried the stock car. What didn't I try? Ah! Right, I have heard someone on the forums, because I love the Ginetta G40 Cup. And with the last beta, it felt better than it ever had done. It's just a great little low-powered tin top. But it used to be terrible under braking ages ago. And I've heard someone on the forum saying it's absolutely great now, and another person saying no, it's terrible. Or no, the tyres feel better, but it's got the braking issue back. Or it just break away as soon as you breathe on the brakes. So Ginetta G40 Cup. Let's have a look at that whilst I've got my extra time. I'm going to stay... Well, no, actually, even though I've been using this for the testing ground for the GT3s and 4s, I'm very used to the Ginetta G40. One of my favourite English tracks here, which is Alton Park, so I'm going to go there. Let's go and find our G40. And I'll switch my gear shifter into H pattern, because we can have some H pattern fun. So, yeah, we'll go out. I'm not used to being here on a heavily rubbered track, though. So I'm going to take that down to default progressing, because that's what I'm used to. Or maybe light rubber, because default progressions got a little bit more like green. So we'll go for, like, we'll keep temperatures and everything the same. Or dates the same. Temperatures aren't going to be the same, because we're in a different part of the world at this track, and everything. Oh, hang on. G-Foil is saying it was horrible, and it was me saying that on the forum. Oh, right, okay, brilliant. Right, I've actually got someone in here who's one of the people that was saying this on the forum. So what did you find that was bad about this car? Because this is going to be my first time trying it after on this new beta. So I'm just going to go into setups. see if there's anything odd about the setups. I've noticed one thing that's odd about this setup already. Look at the tyre pressures. With the tyre pressures being higher at the rear than at the front, it would suggest to me that the back end might become skatey. Brake bias 65 to the front. It's always been very far to the front in this car, but that might be a bit further forward than it was. I'm not sure. Look at that. Huge amount of bump stop. That's going to make it sort of very skatey after the edge of grip and reach the edge of grip quite quickly. What's Foil saying? I just remember it vibrating all the time. I was using default plus FFB. Right, yes. Right, I think I did see that. Oh, look. We've got an adjustable there. Is that actually adjustable? We've got an adjustable. We never used to have an adjustable diff on this car. Has anyone else clocked that? We've got an adjustable diff on this car. No preload, but we can adjust power and coast. That's amazing. Right, so what are the default values? How do these work? So that's 2.7, is it? So how far? The numbers go down that way. So it's more open. Ah, I know why they've brought this in, because it used to be really skatey under lift-off and braking. And look, that the back's more locked up at the front, which would make sense. So we can adjust that now. Right, just before I take it out, I think I read your thing about it vibrating, and I will say this. I don't use Default Plus, and for people who do use it, you know, it does give you, as well as what's coming through the steering wheel, Default Plus will give you the some of the resistance you'd feel through. It tries to emulate G-force effects. I don't get on with that. I want what's coming through the steering wheel, but I did try using it for a bit to try and get on with that, and it does help you intuitively take corners. However, because it introduces those on top of your normal things that come from the steering rack, what I did notice is that you actually have to turn the FFB down for Default Plus. Otherwise, if you've got it set up at a certain strength in default, and you've got it so you can go down a straight, and you're doing 100, and you can just do that with the wheel, and like it'll follow the wheels and center. With Default Plus, if I did that, it would start oscillating. So I don't use Default Plus. I don't like what it introduces. So what I might try, just to see what foil, what you're talking about here, I'll try it on both. But I'm going out on default first. It was slow, lazy, and boring. Well, it is a slow car. It's always been a slow car. I mean, when was it? Did you try this a lot before the beta? Because it's always been slow. It's not a fast car. Didn't try it, change the setup at all. Was also at Alton Park. Good choice, mate. I think it's the ending vibration, which is very strong. And you had the low force boost at 0. Okay, right. So I'll give you my, before I even try it, I'll give you my, this is my default, or my hang on, my FFB settings as they are at the moment. So there you go. I sometimes swap between having no extra effects and sometimes having them. I don't like to introduce extra effects, but I don't mind doing it in Autobility 2 because they are based off of the actual physics rather than canned effects. But that is my gain. And I also have low force boost at 5, which might bring in vibrations. Let's have a look. So I've got my H pattern going. I'm going to use the default setup right now. Okay, got a little bit. I don't know if you can even see that, but I've got a tiny little bit of steering vibration. Yeah, I can definitely feel the engine through the steering. Don't quite like my default seating position here. Come down a bit. There's nothing. Yeah, I'm not getting anything too severe. Nothing too severe. Let's pop it on default plus. Default plus. That's a... Is that a little bit stronger? Well, it's about the same. Nothing too extreme though, but I can definitely feel the engine vibrating. Let's see what it feels like to drive. Oh God, control your revs, Paul. And don't stall it. I'm deliberately trying to only give it as much revs as I give my real car, and of course it's got a racing clutch, so I need more. And it's much harder to feel the biting point because I haven't got a brilliant clutch pedal here. I'd love to get FANATEC Clubsport pedals, but can't afford it. Right. Cold tyres. Remember, we're on cold tyres. Right, I'm going to watch those brake temperatures because we've got quite a forward bias there. But forward bias in AMS2, as I said earlier, isn't as forward bias as it is in other sims. You need more forward bias in AMS2 to get the same results. Now, like I said, I haven't tried this since this beta. But I did try it on the last one and I thought it felt fantastic because I'm very used to this car. Because I do actually like my slow underpowered. This is definitely not underpowered, but you know, lower power. I like my lower powered tin tops for short races around small tracks. I think they're great. I've always wondered, with the brake bias being set quite forward, when this car used to just lose the back end under braking, if it's because it's got a really out of kilter weight distribution. I'll have to go and look at the specs for this car and see what the weight distribution is when I've finished. But this is, handling wise, I'm not getting anything that's overly intrusive through the steering in terms of vibrations. I can feel the different areas of tarmac alright, but there's nothing overly intrusive. How's those curbs? Yeah, feel those curbs nicely, as I would expect. Right, what if I... Yeah, I'm trail braking a bit too hard there, but I'm not losing the back end. This car used to be so bad, it would just be, you breathed on the brakes. Even when the tyres were fully warmed up, you breathed on the brakes. And the back end would just go out. There you go, like I was holding the brakes. You can see my brake inputs there. I was holding it for quite a while. Nice equal tyre pressures all the way around. It's good. Yeah. I can trail brake with confidence in this car at the moment. You never used to be able to use the brakes to rotate this car because it was just... It's like pulling on the handbrake. Now I can really use them and deliberately, you know, swing it a bit too hard. You can get the back end. Can you drift it? I wonder. Can you be silly with it? Scandinavian flick, and yes! Oh, it was all going so well till my back outside left hit the grass there. Let's just try that again because that was fun. I'm expecting the curb to feel, yeah, quite big. All right, here we go. Don't know if I'm going fast enough. Yeah, it should be. Use a bit of braking. Yeah. Oh, you can have fun with it. Yeah, it's no. This feels really good to me. I really like this. Let's try a few laps, kind of in anger. One thing I love about On Park, the AI used to be so slow through Druids there, and they did a specific update to this track, and that was before any of these new betas started. It's before before 1.5. They did the AI update, and they're so much better around here. Well, I don't know if they will be now that tyre physics have changed again, but they were before 1.5 came out, and then after the AI update, much better. I'm not really looking at the chat at the moment, guys, so I will come back and see what I've missed. I'm kind of half in a conversation with Foil at the moment, but just whilst I'm testing it, I have to get my impression on this. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. I'm not getting any weird steering vibration. There you go. You know, that's all good. That's all good. This is feeling great. See, now, I don't know if it'll do it with this car, but like I said, with the default, there's a problem with the whole default plus thing. I'm going to deliberately cut this chicane so I can show you what I mean. So we get up to a reasonably high speed, and I'm going to jerk the steering wheel. There we go, it's okay. So if I try that again, but on default plus... There we go. What are we doing? About 148 there, something like that. So we'll try that again, jerk the steering wheel. So we need to get to about 148. Jerk the steering wheel. That's what I mean. That, you see that slight oscillation? Don't crash. Try and show you that again. I don't know if I've got a long enough straight. Jerk it. Look at that oscillation. That's what you get with default plus. That's why I don't like default plus. So 140, nearly 148 there. It's actually going slightly slower than I was. Let's go back to the pits because. So what are we on now? Controls. Right, back to normal default. And we're going to go with the same speed and give the steering wheel a jerk. And I'm not talking about a ridiculous crash-causing jerk here. I'm just talking about just a little tug. Which you can do in your real car, because these are kilometers per hour, remember, it's not miles per hour. Right, there we go. 148, and there you go. There you go. There you go. It comes back to center without going crazy. Alright. So just to show you that again, this is why I don't, just in case you didn't know this about default plus, this is why I don't use it. Again, you know, as I said, totally see why people want to use it as well, but I cannot live with that. It's just a complete no-no for me. Hang on. Right. And 148, we want 148, there we are, 148, and yeah, see that? Just not as bad as it did it earlier, but it's not good. So yeah, but the car's feeling really good, great. In fact, I just want to go back to my default steering. And just before I go out, I'll just read what I've missed in the chat. Sorry. Damper at 40, FX at 50. What wheel are you using, G-Foil? I tried it after trying Ginetta Super Cup. It's going to be a big this car compared to the Ginetta Super Cup. Well, big difference. Very different cars. Power-wise, tyre-wise, you know. I think it's the default plus for this car. I don't think it's correctly calibrated. You might be right. I had issues when using the F Junior came out to the spring with that. I just find default plus, generally, it's not what I'm after. Note, oh, I have the 21 millimeter Newton meter DD wheelbase. Even run it maybe at 25% of its maximum strength. I have to try that. You don't have any damper though. Does it do that if you set the damper at 45? I don't have, for AMS2, I've got no damper on my wheel. Don't need it. And I don't need any damping in the game either. Bearing in mind, I am on the FANATEC Clubsport 2.5, which is, to my mind, the best belt drive wheel you can get. It's 8 Newton meters of torque. That's the highest you get on any belt drive, but it's still a belt drive. If I was having a DD, maybe I might need to use a little bit of damping, but I just don't need it. And also, you said that you run your wheelbase. Are you saying you run your wheelbase at 25 of its maximum? Because I would never even run this wheel on 100% gain within the game, because I don't need it. The only reason I would upgrade to a 21 Newton meter wheel, but I wouldn't upgrade because of the sheer force. The higher the Newton meters, the better the torque, so the faster the wheel is. So the more it'll spin back like a real wheel, but you don't need it set up at a high strength, so you can still grab it, because at a high strength you might rip your arm off. You want it as realistic as possible. The Newton meters are there for the torque, for how fast it'll spin back, so, you know, more realistic for things like drifting. But I will tell you this, if you've got your gain in the game set high and your wheel set low, you're going to get clipping. You want the opposite way around. You want your wheel at 100%. This wheel is always at 100% force feedback. But in the game, as you'll see, my gain is set down to 38, okay? So it's a little bit like playing the electric guitar, right? If you plug in a guitar to an amp, a low-powered amp, but you got really high gain pickups on your, massively high gain pickups on your guitar, it's gonna distort the amp. So you're gonna have to turn the amp down. It's got, you've got high output there. It's gonna distort your amp, so you need to turn the volume down on the guitar, but keep the amp at full to get it clean. Okay, if that makes any sense to you, which is like clipping. So you want your wheel at 100 and your gain to come down. That's how you avoid clipping. Bloody hell, you're using 50. Your wheel must be just absolutely to turn. I'd keep your wheel at 100, mate. And if you've got it between 80 and 90, maybe take your in-game game down to between 40 and 30. That way you're going to avoid clipping. And also, in terms of strength, the way I work out strength of the wheel, what I do is I get in my normal road car. And it's a Ford Focus Estate, so it's a reasonable wheelbase. And I know how wide the diameter of the wheel is and everything. And I'll go down the road at 30 and just see how much resistance I get from the wheel with one finger. Okay, and then whatever sim I jump into, I'll pick a car that's the closest thing to that in terms of horsepower, weight and length. So for instance, in this, it's the VW Virtus, the lower powered one. And I'll drive that around at 30 and see if I can get the same kind of resistance while steering with one finger as I adjust the strength. And that's what I set it at. So then when I get in a car like the, you know, McLaren GT3, which I've never driven in real life I've never driven that in my life, but obviously the steering, you get out of the Virtus and the steering's set to how it is in my car, but you get into the McLaren and it's much tighter. Even though I've never driven one, I'll take it as read that that's how stiff the steering is. Obviously you need to adjust as well depending on the size of your wheel compared to the diameter of the wheel of the real car, obviously, because you know, if you drive a NASCAR, great big wheel like this, and then you might be driving on a little F1 wheel, so it's not going to be quite a one-to-one thing, so you might need to adjust individual force feedbacks there. That's just how I do it anyway. You do it any way you like, mate, but to avoid clipping, gain low wheel at as much as possible. Sorry if that was over-explained, by the way. Right. Yeah. What time are we at? Oh! No, I've got enough time. One more little test with this. Just want to see what mucking about with that diff will do. Because it's very hard to get this car... Oh, it's very hard to get this car out under power. Get the back end under power because it's not got an amazing amount of it. But if you use a combination of coast and brake, you can. So let's try and do that at Cascades here. There we go. Easily get the brake back out with a little bit of brake and coast, but hardly any under power. So return to pit box. I love the way it's feeling. Right. So lesser numbers to lock it up more. So 2.5, and let's open up the coast ratio and see if that makes it harder to get to unstabilize the back end under lift off and braking. So let's see what happens under lift off and coast here. Actually, no, I've gone the opposite way round there. Opening it up is going to be... Silly boy. It's because I'm rushing now. I want both locked up as much as possible, right? Because if with it open, that's going to make it worse. Let's try it open. That should make it worse. So under coast now, it should be even worse. It should be even easier to get the back end out, is what I mean. No. Not making a hell of a lot of a difference. Is it going to make a difference for... Oh, I'm rushing things. I haven't got time. I'm rushing things. I'm not doing this properly. What's the quickest test I can do? Right, lock them both up. No, leave that one open. Leave that one open. But lock up the power as much as possible. This should be the point at which I stop the stream, because I'm now thinking about Chinese food. I'm not going to be concentrating properly. Right. Right. Clutch kick it. Clutch kick it. Okay, you can kind of get it to go around, but that first gear is so long with the underpower. So now if I open it up completely underpower, shouldn't be able to even clutch kick it round. Crikey, it goes quite a long way. I'll have to do a separate video maybe on this car when I've got time to do it properly. I'm not doing things properly now. Okay, going around. Yeah, that's definitely harder to get round. It should get round with a little bit of a clutch kick, but not as much. Yeah, those diff settings are making a difference. Right, that's me done. Sorry. I want to come back to this car and do it properly, but I like how that's happening. I'm not getting the vibration through the steering, but I definitely like the way the car is acting for sure. So just to go back over points in this stream, go and have a look at that McLaren. See if you've got that fast bump setting, if you've got it or if you haven't. Because it seems like some people have it and some people don't. But anyway, and thank you very much to Steel Reserve for teaching me a thing or two, but also letting me know that, yeah, there are still things that need to be done with tyre heating and wear, especially on the hards. But I love the way it's handling. I really do. Lovely to discover that thing about the McLaren having the E-diff system. Keep your brake bias very forward, and the car, after a few laps, will not start losing the backhand. Brilliant to know that. Thank you very much to Flip Flops for their help. We had testing last night. Just coming back to everyone in chat, thank you for everyone who's been talking. Last thing that I haven't read is G40. It's actually not too strong for me. Remember, I have the car-specific FFB quite low, and it's really far from clipping. Oh, your car-specific FFB is between 50%. Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Okay. That with 50% game and with FF, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, thank you everyone for watching. I hope you found it interesting. I'm looking forward to doing when 1.6 finally comes out. Yeah, I've got a lot to do before then, but it's now looking like it's going to be sort of, you know, as I said on the forums, mid to late October now. But I know it's all going to be worth it. I've got a lot of faith in Reza, and I'd rather they go through and get things absolutely spot on. Thank you to Reza for what you've done. The GT3s, the GT4s feel great. One thing about the GT4s, after figuring out that problem with the GT4, when I got the setup worked out for it, it's perfect. It's brilliant. I love it. But my mate Flip Flops was like, you've got to try the GT4 Porsche at Barcelona, the new short track. And the GT4 Porsche, oh, it is a lot of fun. It's great, really nice. Really nice. The GT3 McLaren, someone asked me in one of my videos, I need in the comments on one of my videos, I've got to reply to them in the comments. But if they're watching, they did ask, how is it in comparison to R Factor 2? It's getting more, you know, that way inclined every day. I'm pleased to say, because R Factor 2 is one of my favourites. And, you know, things like the whole, you know, keep steering. And I've always loved AMS2, but I'll be the first to admit it's had problems since it started. These days, physics are really, really getting there. You know, I hope in the future they'll work on things like the crash physics. And I'm not talking about damage, I'm talking about crash physics. Because out of all of the sims, I think iRacing is the best to watch for crashes, because cars roll and stuff as you would expect them to in real life. But in AMS2, they're a bit janky. R Factor 2 is pretty good for the way cars will roll, but they do tend to sometimes get to a certain point and then artificially roll. but it's still better than this. Not as good as iRacing. But I love all the sims, as you know. ACC as well. And more. I'm not going to go through. Oh, this is a video about AMS2 anyway. I love running this. I don't want to leave this stream, but if I don't go and order, I'm being lazy tonight. I've been looking forward to ordering a Chinese for ages, and if I don't order it within the next sort of 10 minutes, and then I've got to drive into town and get it, the shop will be shutting. So I need to do that. Thanks everyone, and I hope you've enjoyed the stream. I am now going to end the stream and sign off. See you soon. Might even be online later tonight in some sim capacity. Goodbye. Enjoy your sim racing. I'm going to go. Bye. Bye, bye, bye. Bye.